Sometimes when I stabilize an image, I don't want to stabilize it completely. I want to stabilize it and keep some of the original motion and just reduce the amount. Ideally, I have control over the X and Y axes individually. So in this demonstration, I'm going to show you how you can use an expression modifier to modify a stabilize operation to achieve that level of control. So to begin with, I've got a very simple image sequence with the word steady just animated from bottom left to top right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to track that. So I'll add a tools, tracking, tracker. And before I select my pattern, I'm going to find the frame I want to stabilize to. In this case, that's frame 45. Now I select the tracker pattern and I just find myself a nice little pattern. Then I track forward from 45 to the end of the render range. When I'm done that, I'll return back to frame 45 and I'll do the reverse, tracking backwards to the beginning of the render range. Now that gives me a path that covers from frame 0 all the way, in this case, to 89 or 90. But because I selected the pattern on frame 45, when I go into the Tracker's Operation tab, I'll see Match Move Settings, and I can use the start time or select time as my reference. So when I do my stabilization, it'll use that as the frame it stabilizes to. Let me show you. We'll use the match move operation and we'll set it to background only, which means that we're going to stabilize because we're match moving the background to the background. And you can see it's positioned in the position of frame 45. If I change the reference to start, then it stabilizes it to the start of the motion. If I set it to end, it stabilizes it to the end of the motion. So we'll go back to select time. Now I'm not going to use the tracker operation to do this because it's really very simplistic. Instead, we're going to add a transform tool after the tracker, and I'm going to right-click on the center, and I'm going to say Modify with Expression. That puts in the Modifier tab an expression tool with 9 numeric inputs and 9 positional inputs. We'll connect point 1 with right-click, we'll say connect to tracker 1's steady position, which is a output that has the inverse or opposite movement from the tracked movement. Then under point out, we'll say P1X for point 1's X position and P1Y for point 1's Y position. Now if we hit play, we can see that the tracker's steady position is basically giving us what we need in order to nullify the movement we tracked. But if we go to frame 45 and look at the value it's producing, we can see that that's 0.5, 0.5. So if we're going to do any multiplication or scaling of this, we need it to be centered on 0, 0. So I'm going to say negative 0.5 for both P1Y and P1X. And because of order of operations in math, I'm going to wrap those in parentheses to ensure that that takes place before any other math does. Now I want to scale that result, so I'm going to say times n1, and for P1Y, I'm going to say times n2. That's because n1 and n2 are the names of number n1 and number n2 on the control panel. So if we say 1, we're saying times 100% of the stabilization value. And before we have a look at the results of that, I'm going to say plus 0.5 at the end of those, and that's because having removed the 0.5 center and then multiplied by the amount we want to do our scaling by, we then need to move it back into position. Having done all of that, let's go ahead and hit play, and we can see that a value of 1, 1 in our number in 1 and number in 2 is giving us 100% stabilization. But what if I wanted only 80%? Could I put 0.8 and 0.8 in there? Yes, I could. And now we keep a little bit of that movement on the X and Y axes. If I set the stabilization on the X axis to 1 and leave 0 for Y, then I'm going to get all the Y motion with perfect stabilization on the X axis. So to make that easy to reuse and to understand, especially if you're passing it on to another artist, we'll go to the Config tab on the expression, and under Number Controls, we'll say number 1 is X stabilize, renaming that input, and number 2 is Y stabilize. Then we'll turn off number 3, 4, and all the rest down through 9 because we don't need them. We'll also go to Point Controls, and we'll say point in 1 is track stabilize, or steady is the name of the input, I should say. Value, so we know where that's coming from, and we'll turn off the rest of the point values. And the reason we do this is because now when we return to the Controls tab, you can see that it's optimized to show just the information we need for this particular expression. So I hope that's helpful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me directly or contact anyone at Ion Software at tech@ionline.com.